and we're going to have a feedback poll at the end of the presentation. So if you could stick around and do that, that would be great. And that's it. So without further ado, let me turn it over to the Bulls team to introduce themselves, their work, and do the presentation. And thanks y'all for joining.
So thank you very much for that, Jessica. My name is Rashid Bellamy. I'm the COO at Made in Durham. All those amazing things that Jess just referred to is done by these guys on the team here, and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. But I'm going to introduce Dave. He is actually going to be the one at the helm, driving the ship with the other team members, providing inputs where necessary. So, Dave, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Dave is our branding and marketing comms guru. So everything you see that you're about to see as far as our slideshow, that's Dave's creation. Content are the guys, and Dave's the one, the creativity behind all of our branded material. So there you go, Dave.
Wow, thank you. I was all prepared to say, like, I'm just gonna be here to support everybody else, and the main part of it comes later when we get into the nuts and bolts of how everything is actually done. Just to reiterate the gratitude that we have for the support with the Community Practice Partnership and Accelerate NC. And the whole idea of pairing life sciences with workforce development is really what we're going to get to the crux to later today. So we got a little bit of setup, so I'll be quiet and let the rest of the team introduce themselves, so there's no surprises when we get into the presentation later. Maybe Joseph, I'll go to you first.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Joseph Featherstone. I am the Director of Corporate Partnerships with Made in Durham. Good to see everybody. Glad to be here. Thank you.
How about Dominique? There you go.
Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, everybody. My name is Dominic Oliver. I'm the Director of Systems and Initiatives here at Made in Durham. Ross Ellis.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Roxellis Jones. I'm the Community Engagement Manager with Made in Durham, and I'm excited to share with you all the work that we do today. Thanks for having us. Kick it back over to Dave.
Yep. And we're going to bring up some slides. There we go. So as I mentioned, we'll get into just a really quick sort of level set on who we are, how we got started, and our mission, vision, and purpose, because all of our work that you'll see is really derived from the mission, vision, and purpose. So first of all, our team is Made in Durham. This is just a quick look at all of our lovely faces, and you get to see the team. This is us hanging out one day not too long ago in Durham. And sometimes it takes the village to look after a village, right? So Made in Durham, the namesake is really exactly who we are. You can see back in 2011, there were 100 experts that were interviewed as part of the landscape analysis, which we'll come back to in a little bit. This landscape analysis was about Made in Durham. It's building an education to career system. That paper was published. So it was 100 folks locally who took it upon themselves they had a reflection on the city and what was going on, and said, hey, how do we take a look at things in an objective way across all different disciplines, and sort of ascertain the landscape and see what needs we have and how we can fill them. And that work continued. There was a task force that was developed, and then as you can see in 2015, the Made in Durham Task Force established Made in Durham. So obviously a milestone for us. That's when we got started. There was a lot of work, again, focusing really in that education to career system. There were white papers, there were working groups, different sort of community engagements that happened throughout the years. And then in 2021, I'm going to minimize I love everybody's faces, but I want to be able to see what I'm doing. In 2021, we created the collaborative to engage young adults in the life sciences industry, going back to the pairing of life sciences and workforce development. And that got us to the Bulls Academy concept, which currently is where we're focused, is the Bulls Life Sciences Academy. So that's where we're here, and we're looking toward the future. And going back to our foundation drives our work every day. And I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, but the mission about identifying and addressing gaps and barriers in the education and career system, that's what we do. That's what we do every day. Our boots on the ground operations are around identifying and addressing those gaps. But we do that through forming new models of collaboration. And we really work with the area youth. We work with a ton of community organizations, and then also our businesses and corporate partners. And that's all to get us toward a future where there are multiple pathways of choice for our residents. And that translates to a robust pipeline of talent for businesses, and our whole community thrives. And underscoring all of this is that concept of equity. And that's really where, if it were to come back to one word, that's what it's about. As we get to our purpose, which is believing that all Durham youth and young adults should have access and opportunity to participate in our area's economic prosperity. Life sciences is an industry, or they are industries in our area that are particularly robust, and that led us to that industry sector in particular as we got started with this initiative. So it's all about what we do so that we get to this vision because we believe. And again, that kind of all circles back to equity. So how do we do all that? We're going to talk about our work. Most of that is going to be centered in the Bulls initiative, which you can see there. But the first step is to look at our strategic work and how do we even get to developing these different initiatives and pathways. And that'll entail a systems overview, how we think about systems, again, that education and career system, how are we evaluating that, identifying the needs and then addressing them through these pathways, and how we develop those. It's important to have metrics and evaluation in place so that we understand how we're doing, both real time and aggregate, so that we understand the impact. And then scalability and funding, how do we keep things moving over time? So the first part of this is, that our strategic thinking has been refined and honed to tie all of our activities and efforts together in delivering that mission. So this goes back to the mission, identifying and addressing the gaps and barriers in the education to career system. And that leads us to our strategic goal. This is kind of a condensed form of our strategic plan as an organization. And our goal in identifying and then more importantly, even addressing those needs is to develop these durable and sustainable education to career initiatives. Those are focused in high demand sectors. In our case right now, what we're going to talk about today is about life sciences. A little bit of a spoiler alert, we're looking at new industries now based on the work that we've done in life sciences. So we want to make sure that they're durable and they're sustainable and they're high demand so that there's high growth and high wage potential for our residents. And so that gets into kind of the actual work. That's the systems work. And that leads to pathways development. We want to have that metrics and evaluation. We want to have those metrics and evaluation in place, leading us to the scalability and funding. And you'll see under each of these pillars, we have very specific objectives and actions that are associated with each of those. So it's all about, in our case, over the past couple of years, it's been developing these pathways, but then also documenting and making sure that everything's working together in a productive way, and making sure that we know what we're doing, and anybody could step in at any time and pick this up and even replicate it in other areas if needed. And I'll do a quick stop there just to say, like, if anybody has some questions, maybe we can put those in the chat or something like that. I don't know if there's a different protocol that you guys want to use, but I want to make sure that we're able to capture those thoughts as we get into this later on with the Q&A. So we're just going to go through each of those 4 pillars. And the first one we want to take a look at is the systems, because they drive much of what we do here. And I'm going to turn it over to my wonderful colleagues here to walk us through the next couple of slides, which is why we're all here today.
All right, I appreciate that, Dave. And yeah, so with us, we do start at our systems level, and part of what we do at our systems level is that's where we start to understand what is happening in our community. We start to take a look at what's going on inside areas, specifically today, like life science. So before we would develop a pathway, before we would develop an initiative, we really want to see what's happening. Made in Durham was founded as a backbone organization So we try not to recreate things that are already taking place in our community. Part of the ways that we do that is how we take a look at our systems work. One of the things that we were founded on and are currently updating is our landscape analysis. And that's the way that we kind of take a look at our community. We take a look at our education to career system. From there, we will strategize to say, how do we collaborate? How do we build and then implement, which is what we've done to lead to our Bulls initiative. Once we launch an initiative, what we'll start to do is start to take our specific objectives and start to use those to create those metrics. Once we have our metrics, we're able to determine how well we're doing versus what we need to add, resource, take away, implement, partner. And we start to do that through a new lens of this analysis in our landscape to then kind of create and collaborate and build some more. So our systems viewpoint is what allows us the opportunity to really kind of put our boots on the ground and be really effective for all youth in Durham. Next slide. And so, as I was saying, we took our systems approach and that led to the pathway development of our Bulls initiative. So the way that we did our Bulls initiative is we partnered first with the Durham Tech, who offers the credential. While we were partnering with the Durham Tech, NC Biotech actually reached out about gaps in the workforce, in the life science workforce. So that led to a natural partnership for the expansion of our Bulls program. So next slide, real quick. So what we did as Made in Durham is we thought about what are the major areas and what are the major touch points for our students as we're going through creating a pathway. So we start in our community, which is going to be meeting our young people where they live and meeting our young adults where they live. We reach out to community-based organizations, public school system, everywhere where they're already located. And then we also have our youth engagement, which is once we've located our students, once we've created awareness for Bulls and we've started to bring students into our Bulls program, youth engagement takes over, and that is going to be their educational experience. So that's where we do all of our wraparound supports. That's where we help to build our students through the program. And then once they're finished, we look at alumni and corporate engagement. With our alumni and corporate engagement, we try to keep them connected to the program itself. We also try to get them in touch and through the hiring process. So that may be soft skill development, that may be the actual getting them to the interviews and in the interviews, that may be helping them with the interview skills and just getting them into that position. And then working with our corporates on the back end for things like corporate culture and what does that mean and look like for students who aren't typically there and aren't typically represented in their buildings. That may mean what the alumni associations look like inside of those organizations. And so we do a lot of work in these three areas, and that's where we're going to have my colleagues kind of take over and talk about the specific areas that they run. Our youth engagement manager is actually off today. As you can imagine, she's super, super hard working, so we're going to kind of fill in her spaces, but we do have somebody who runs our community engagement, our youth engagement, and then our alumni and corporate engagement as well. So I will turn that over to Roxellis to explain our community engagement.
Thank you, Dominique. So I won't go back to introduce myself, but I do lead the community engagement at Made in Durham, and in my role, I oversee the BBRC Community Engagement Initiative, which includes the Bulls Professional Learning Community and a network of Bulls ambassadors, which are both community ambassadors and alumni ambassadors. In implementing the important work that we're doing in building our ecosystem for Durham's youth and their families, through collaboration, we leverage the credibility and the relationships of our community partners to promote life science career exposure and recruitment opportunities. We go to the next slide, please. There we go. Key functions include supporting the community engagement coordinator and the Bull students through their awareness and life science events, information sessions, and through the Bulls enrollment process. Recruitment and enrollment cycles usually tend to last 6 to 8 weeks and include 3 information sessions and a lot of events with our community partners, as well as application enrollment office hours. We work closely with ambassadors to embed life science awareness and conversations into their already existing community events, so leaning towards or not pulling them away from their mission, but embedding more of life science awareness. At the end of each recruitment cycle, applicants are evaluated, approved, and warmly handed off to the youth engagement cycle. So we do evaluate the applications and do the selections and enrollment for the students before getting into the youth engagement cycle. And Therese is not in today, so I will cover her part. Therese is actually the youth engagement manager with Made in Durham, and in her role, she oversees the coaches and provides them with tools and resources needed to support the students throughout the enrollment process and program. After the recruitment and enrollment is complete, students take 3 courses consecutively over 5 months at Durham Tech and prepare for a career in trained and certified process technician. While enrolled, students access various wraparound supports, including tutoring, one-on-one coaching, and a $1,600 stipend. It's important for students they must meet their specific academic requirements to receive the full stipend of their amount. Our education partners at Durham Tech also provide support, and they're on the call today, so shout out to Durham Tech. Throughout the youth engagement phase, the success coaches play a critical role as a supportive force, guiding the students to their next step. At the end of the program, we hold a graduation ceremony and celebrate the students' accomplishments and facilitate a warm handoff to our corporate sector, which is Joseph. Joseph, I'll pass it over to you now. And thank you for working with me. I'm a little bit under the weather.
Well, thank you, Roxellis. Excited to connect with our young people after they are finishing their graduation with the Bulls. And like Roxella said and Dominique, it is a handoff, a warm handoff. And so we are intentional and strategic about ensuring that before they get to the next part or the next piece of the puzzle, that they are already seeing the faces, so they're not seeing new faces by the time they graduate. By the time they get from community development to youth development, we're in the spaces just to ensure that there is relationship building and familiarity around our young people. And so with alumni and corporate engagement, this is where we get to really dive into they graduated. They are now looking for a job. They are wanting to get into that life science field because they are excited about it. And so I get to help drive them to that workforce and to that pathway. Initially, what we are trying to do is continue to build engagement. Building engagement also means how we continue to help them with professional development. So that's around the education part, exposure them to different meet and greets and networking sectors so that they can continue to fine tune those skills. And then ultimately employment. We want to make sure that they are employed. So engagement, education, exposure, employment. And along that pathway and along that line, we are continuing to help them to boost their resumes, make sure that their LinkedIn pages are really, really up to par. And we do that also not by ourselves, because we cannot do this work by ourselves. We continue to do that with our partnership with Durham Tech. So we work with Durham Tech as well to continue to grow our young people in that way. So that's the main thing around that. But we also understand and learn that during those 5 months, some of our young people may not want to continue life science. So it's not just life sciences, but it is what is your pathway that you want to engage in to success. We are pushing for life science, but if they want to do something else, we want to encourage that and help them to find that pathway as well. Or if it's going back to school to get more certifications or degrees so that they can continue their role in life science, we want to push that as well. And so a lot of it is around networking events, around mentorship programs, and introducing them to career services and workshops so that they continue to get in front of the companies, get in front of the hiring managers, get in front of the folks that are looking at their resume so they know the names and not just the papers that they are looking at, but they're actually getting to know the young people that are applying for the jobs. And so as we go into the corporate side, my job is just that. How do I, one, contact, who do I need to contact to connect, to collaborate? Everything is about relationship building. So I want to contact these companies ahead of time, figure out who we need to connect with that can help us to drive our young people to the interviews and to the jobs. And then how do we collaborate on the back end to make sure that our Bulls graduates are getting in front of the hiring managers and that they are the persons, the pipeline choice, the pipeline employees of choice to engage in these spaces and to get these jobs. And so, and it's at the end of the day, it's not about actually getting a job, but it's actually about securing a career. And so we don't want just our young people getting jobs, we want them to secure a career in life science where they can grow and thrive.
Excellent. And that works for everybody, right? So if those students are thriving, their employers are also thriving because of the productivity and the sort of, you know, collegial family that they're building amongst the staff and the folks that they get that are a good match for them. But throughout that whole pathway, we support all of our stakeholders through communication and information, and that's both incoming and outgoing. So we approach our communications, I'll say it internally, but it's really with our stakeholders. When I say internally, I mean our students, our partners, both corporate and educational and otherwise. And even before they get into the program or initiative and after. So there's that recruitment process that Roxella talked about, community engagement. There's that alumni part that Joseph just talked about. And then there's the middle where they're actually sort of in the initiative, right? There's information and life sciences awareness and learning that's going out to folks. And we approach that just like we would, a lot of companies would approach that as marketing, right? So we brand it, we try to make it engaging, and it's not just sort of dry communication. We want to try to engage folks in the process way before and then support them after. We've also built in various surveys. It's not a survey overload. We're intentional about that, but we try to get relative information that helps us continually optimize and improve what we're doing along the way. So a lot of it is about communication and information. We talk about wraparound support for the students. The communication and information is kind of like a wraparound for the whole pathway. And then also throughout the pathway, we have our objectives and actions underneath each pillar. And these are all owned by stakeholders and they're tracked for performance. So we've got a whole map of everything that happens under systems, the Bulls pathway itself, our metrics, and our funding. And you can see here, we've spared you the entire spreadsheet, or maybe I've spared myself the entire spreadsheet here today, but you can see in some of these headers here, there's basically an activity, there's a team owner, and then there's an individual owner. Those might be the same, they could be different or a combination, right? So and then we've got a goal for each and the objective, and it gets down to the completion date. And then we're tracking all of that activity to, again, continually kind of optimize and be as efficient as possible, partly because, you know, we want to be good stewards of the resources and support that we get. We also want to be effective and have the biggest positive impact that we can have at every step of the way. This part makes Rashid happy. And then we get into metrics, right? We just sort of talked about that, like how we're mapping everything out so that we can track it and understand how we're doing. Part of that is tracking. All right, let me just start over on that. We have key metrics of Bulls that are tracked according to the most relevant performance measures of each area. That's a lot of words there. Basically, what we've done is there's a whole list of things that we track. We'll talk about some of that in a minute that's relevant to our conversation here today. But then there's also kind of like the Cliff's notes of that, right? Like we want to be able to kind of pull some key metrics up, understand how we're doing at any given moment during the life cycle of a particular cohort for Bulls. We also want to be able, when we have that view, to understand kind of our aggregate impact. So we've built these dashboards for each individual area. So again, sparing you the whole spreadsheet, these are just some key metrics that are relevant for each area. So the dashboard is not the same metric for each of these areas. It's really relevant to what they're doing and what metrics help them get their job done every day. And again, sort of pushing toward that impact that we can have. And on the next slide, we've got an example of one of those. So this is the youth engagement. We planned this on purpose with Therese not being here today to show you this one. So this is the most recent completed cohort information. So we have 2 cohorts going on right now. For us, those are cohorts 7 and 8. This is information from cohort 6. So I'll say above the fold or above the line there, these are sort of like real time. This is real time information, right? So we've got a snapshot of our most recent cohort according to their sort of basic demographics. And interestingly for us, we see these fluctuate quite a bit. So it's an important part of the piece, the view that we have at any given moment to understand which cohort we're in, right? Based on the demographics. Key metrics for this area, this is where they enroll in classes and labs and so forth with Durham Tech, and they're parts of the certification that NC Biowork has helped us with, and we know that there are certain things that they have to do, right? So we want to know how many people are enrolled. The first step along the way for them is passing the GMP SOP test. Then there's a biowork test. There's a biocert review that gets them toward graduation, and that biowork certification that they're after. So we also wanted to highlight this one because we get to say we had a 90% graduation rate with this cohort, which was amazing. And it's all a part of continually tracking and learning and kind of focusing our efforts toward the impact and being efficient with that. And then the second part of the youth engagement work is really the support that they're giving the students along the way. And that's not just putting them in a class to get a certification and crossing our fingers and hoping that works. There's a lot of work that goes into making sure that they get the resources and support that anybody would need in order to pass these certifications. So there's tutoring, there's some assessment tests at the beginning at orientation to understand if they need support with their math. And then as they get into the biowork coursework, there's tutoring around that. And then we also have wraparound supports like childcare. There's a food pantry on campus. That's through our Durham Tech partnership. And then we have study sessions, which are now led by one of our Bulls alumni, which is also amazing. We do career events and career fairs. And then we have cohort meetups that are like bowling and going to the driving range. So embedded within the work of getting the certification is social and having more of a a friendly and family community vibe going on through all this work, because we're all people and we all need a little bit of that in order to get through it too. And then at the bottom, we keep track of our aggregate impact. And so again, this is going back a couple of cohorts for us. And just for this particular area, again, we want to just understand what the aggregate impact has been over time and just keep that in mind as we're kind of assessing things. The thing that these dashboards do for us is when we look at them, it helps us ask questions and just say, how are we doing? Why is this number like it is? And that gets us toward like looking for ways to improve. We can go, yep, okay, there we go. One of the other tools that we built in around tracking performance are these journey maps. And these are kind of tiny. We'll be able to look at one in full view. But that enables us to pinpoint the pinpointing of interactions alongside our specific milestones, right? So there's specific milestones that, let's say, a student's going to go through during the recruitment process and the community engagement process. And we can look at what stage everybody's in and say, okay, we had a bunch of students fall out of an information session, attendance was down. So why was that? What happened before that? So again, these are tools that help us to ask the right questions to see where we're at, and then how can we improve. So we can go to the next one. And you guys that know me, that I know you, we can
Yes.
talk about this slide. So this is a journey map for community engagement, and you can see how it leads right in, again, a warm handoff to the youth engagement.
Yeah, and I will add to the community engagement map, what made this wasn't something that we created starting the work. This is something we created after the work came together. And I think that's really important for us to know that allowing us opportunity to understand what the process is like before creating a journey map is really essential to the process. A lot of times we get into places where we want something to go a certain way, and it doesn't go that way. And Made in Durham is continuously finding a way to make revisions and recommendations based off the work that we're doing. And this is the process map for now for our community ambassadors, and it could look different in a year or so. But this is currently the way that we are engaging our community members, as well as supporting the student through that process as they're hearing about Bulls Academy. What is the next step once they hear about the Bulls Academy opportunity is coming to an information session and applying and completing the application. So again, this visual is really for a way for us to present the opportunity for our community partners so they can share the Bulls Initiative with their folks, and for us to also have a visual map to share with others in the process, knowing that this can also be revised.
Yeah, they also created it so that I don't have to keep asking Roxellos what comes after what, so to make sure it's for me to also help me along as well.
That's right. It's mainly for Rashid.
I see a theme. So keeping on the metrics tip here. So, our metrics are not only internal, we've just gone through a few different ways that we track metrics in pretty good detail for ourselves internally and that we can share with our partners. But we also have, metrics that we need to be accountable to because we are funded and we get resources through lots of different ways. We need to stick to those as well. And these are relevant for us today. These are Build Back Better performance metrics for us. And so these are also things that we're keeping track of. And these translate directly back to the objectives and actions that we have under all of our pillars, right? So we're making sure that when we map out the work, we're in line with our mission. It's, we're working toward our vision because of what we believe, and we're doing it in a way that tracks back to what it is that we are supposed to be doing based on the resources that we get. So when we map out the work, we're making sure that these objectives and these metrics are being met. And that's all for the right reasons. Like if we're doing all of these things here, we're having a positive impact. And then the last part we'll go through here on the pillars is our scalability and funding. And an important point here is that it's not just about dollars. It's about telling our story effectively. And even more key here is remaining relevant to everybody, right? So we want to talk about the work that we're doing, and we want to stay relevant with folks who are out there. And that's another reason why we're grateful to be here today, because we get to talk about what it is we do with folks, and hopefully it's a relevant story for them. And one of the ways that we're getting to do that really right now, this edition came out 2 days ago. We have a local magazine, it's called Durham Magazine, go figure. And we have a spread series in this magazine through our partnership with Durham County. We have a sponsored spread here for the next 4 issues, and we're calling this, it's a bi-monthly magazine here, and we're calling the series A Life in Science. And so we were able to kind of introduce the program or the initiative and our work and how things got started and our sort of group of 4 core partners, and introduce or reintroduce the effort to our area. And then over the next 3 opportunities or spreads that we'll get, we'll be able to feature individual student stories and sort of like what happened in their story, and what are the tentacles that come out from them as far as how their story played out in the different partnerships that were involved there. So it's really about, telling our story, being able to tell our story, finding ways to tell our story, as part of that's a part of our strategy as far as the scalability of our efforts. And then lastly, we'll talk about sustaining our momentum, right? So we're doing all that work, and now we need to think about how do we sustain that? And we think about that in all 4 of our areas too. And this is really just kind of a list as we take a look at these next 2 slides of a lot of the activity that's currently going on. And it's really just an exhibit of this is kind of what we find in our area, what it takes. There got to be a lot of irons in the fire. And instead of just having a bunch of irons in the fire, we try to make sure that we've got efforts that are aligned with these 4 pillars that we have in our work. So it takes a continual push to move the needle. And I know my colleagues might have some things to chime in on here, particularly with this first one, maybe with the systems work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dave. So yeah, with the systems work, I think for us, some of the things that have been really beneficial in the establishing of our Bulls program and maintaining it is the fact that we are iterating our Bulls program at every cohort. Sorry. So at every cohort, we're able to take a look at what we just did and make changes very, very quickly. And so as we do that, we get a lot of data, we get a lot of information to kind of move forward. But what we also look at is where do gaps and where do barriers still persist? So where are things that we're not able to address with the current setup of our Bulls program, with the Bulls program in general, and how do we kind of continue to make sure that all youth in Durham are being able to have equitable access to pathways and economic mobility. So as we are taking a look at that now, there are some major things that we're looking at. So again, we're updating that landscape analysis. We're looking at additional pathways. Now that may be something that is different inside of life science companies, or that may be something outside of life science completely. Also, the economic mobility report is just to kind of take a look at how Durham is doing with economic mobility for its youth. And then we're also in the process of doing a public policy analysis just to kind of see what things are out there that are hindering our work. And I see that we got a in the chat. So yeah, great question. So in order to iterate each cohort, there's a few steps where we stop and do reflection. So for instance, our community engagement team will run a recruitment cycle. And so their recruitment cycle has different components and different key points to it. But once they're finished, so a cohort starts, right now we have cohort 7 and 8 that are active. So once those finish, then our community engagement team stops right then to start to evaluate how they did in recruitment, what was successful, what was not successful prior to them starting the next recruitment cycle. Similarly, that happens with our youth engagement and our alumni and corporate engagement as well. And then we also do what we call a Bulls retreat with our key stakeholders like our Durham techs, where we'll come together as different organizations to kind of go over the best things that happen and the worst things that happen, and how do we update and modify those as well. So there are constant times and there are dedicated points where we will stop to evaluate and kind of make it part of the process before we move on to the next step.
And part of that too is on the front end, mapping it out the way that we do, and then being able to track it along the way, and then having those that concerted effort to reflect and adjust.
And that's also where the journey maps come into play. A lot of times they give us points to say, how did this point happen? How did that point go? Where we can kind of iterate in small pieces or in large scale.
Awesome. And then if you saw on the last part of that last slide, we don't even have to go back. Just the fact that we've said this a couple of times, right? So we're in a cohort, or we just finished a cohort. We've got 2 going on, and we're recruiting for the next one. So it's kind of like, you know, we're right in, at some point, we're juggling more than one cohort, but that's what it takes for us in our community to keep it moving. And then again, with metrics and evaluation, just keeping that alignment going. Playbooks is something that is specific that we didn't necessarily mention. We've sort of touched on what it is without saying that word, but that's a thing. We do have playbooks around that. And then with our scalability and funding, we've sort of talked about some of this. You'll see that our presentation here today is on the list. We've got some folks going up to Boston later this month. There's a national cityscapes. I think that's more of like an economic summit that's going to happen in Durham in May. So we'll have a hand in that. This is something that's kind of new for us, is we're getting to the point now that we're completing more and more of these cohorts, and we're finding opportunities to talk about the work in spheres sort of outside of Durham. So we're appreciative of that. And again, it's about that peer-to-peer learning. So every time we go to share something, we get something out of it from other folks too. And I think that brings us to questions.
And just
This
to
is-
note that I
I've-
will, sorry, go ahead. I will stop recording so the questions and the answers will not be recorded.
Thanks, Pearl. I just want to say thanks to the whole Made in Durham team for sharing those processes and systems